So how do people grow when they meet Aaron Brown?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is I challenge all of my athletes and clientels, of course, myself and our team included, in a way more than just performance. Um, when they come up, I mean, we challenge them on what they believe in, their academics, their future goals. And so we tie those things into sports performance training. And so, yes, like the main mantra of Elevate Sports Performance, the Jump Doctor, is to take a client from point A athletically and then steer them into the direction of point B, which is the end goal being providing or producing more explosiveness than what they were before. But in the process of doing that, there's these windows of time where we get to really get to know the athletes and challenge the athletes on a personal level. And so it's really cool to see that we're not just seeing this athletic gain and this physical gain, but we're also seeing this emotional and the spiritual and even occupational gains as well, for personal development too.
Yeah. And I'm here talking with Aaron Brown, who's also known as the Jump Doctor on Instagram. And I have personal experience with my family working with Aaron. And Aaron, growth for me, technical training for me has always been a blessing. Like I haven't been the most talented athlete in the room, but I had work ethic and I had good coaches. And what I've noticed in your philosophy and the way that you work with people is that sometimes a tweak here and a tweak there, it makes all the difference in the world. So how in the world did you even come to want to create the Elevate group? Like, how did all this get started?
Yeah, so I played college basketball, grew up in Charleston, played at Wando, and then went on, was fortunate enough to play at Erskine College for all 4 years. And then after my time at Erskine, like many college athletes, you grow distant from exercise. I mean, you've got no goals anymore to pursue. You've kind of made it, for those that don't go on and play professionally. So I fell into that cohort. So I remember going to the local YMCA in Georgia, and I walked in, grabbed a cup of coffee, sat down, and then stood back up when my wife was done working out. So I went a whole hour and a half of not doing anything. And I remember on that drive back, my wife and I were talking like, well, what's going to be my goal now? Why should I even stay in shape? So I actually picked up American Ninja Warrior training. I won't get into that story, but 2 years of training. Long story short, they actually ghosted me. We were in communication. They loved my video, but they never called me. Yeah. And so out of that, I redirected. And though I played in college, I actually couldn't dunk myself, which is kind of an amazing feat at that. Like you play at a very high level, but athletically, you're not inclined. So I've always wanted to be able to dunk. At the time, I was also getting my doctorate in physical therapy. And so I had the resources of MUSC's library to start developing these programs, and started looking into the research with how to actually change someone's athleticism. And this was all just on my own time, just something fun to look forward to with training. Started putting myself through these programs that I created, and lo and behold, they started to work. And, once a plateaued athlete, and I had tried all of these different programs before in the past. I tried the strength shoe. I tried jump soles, which is one and the same. I tried, there's a whole bunch of different programs, but none of them seemed to work. So I was this plateaued athlete, and for the lifetime, I remember actually I told somebody, it's like, yeah, I've kind of reached my peak. I won't ever get past this plateau. But I never actually challenged that myself. And I think a lot of times we face that in life is that, we're hit with this plateau or this wall, and it's like, well, I can't get past it. So I really challenged it, looked into the research, and the programs that I developed worked for me. I started dunking. And then at the time, I was also working as an athletic trainer for MUSC. I got furloughed during the COVID years, which means a fire with the intent to rehire. And so I remember sitting at the table with my wife. We got these bills, and I was like, well, what are we going to do now? And so I had this program that worked, and I was like, surely there's some kids right now that don't have access to performance training that, really want to incline their athleticism. So I reached out to a few athletes in the area, to name a few: Aiden McCool, Patrick Antonelli, Ty Shafsma. Those were actually my first 3 clients. Put them through the program, had amazing outcomes with them. And then from there, it's just slowly grown. And the cool thing about the program is that it it builds on itself. So there's multiple different levels. So I actually currently have 7 levels. Technically, I have 11 programs and 7 different levels of the program. There's kind of like this split effect of like whether you want to go down the jump school or multi-directional explosiveness.
Right.
They all build on themselves. That way it prevents that plateauing effect.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah. Tell us that building on effect. I'm so intrigued by that, right? Because the first time I saw the exercises that you were doing, they looked a little goofy, right? It's like these exercises that are slow and methodical, and 98% of humans just don't think about putting themselves in these very interesting positions. But then I noticed that you stack those positions together, and that creates the end result. So what's the overarching philosophy? Like, how does the technical side of your business work to get the performance?
Yeah. To keep it simple, walking. Let's say walking, which is an activity that humans do a whole lot more than they do these athletic or dynamic movements. Walking is a very knee dominant activity. So if I were to walk from here to the bathroom, I'm more than likely moving through my knees, through my quads. The problem is when you get athletes who translate that knee dominant activity to dynamic activity. So the knee joint's a hinge joint, right? So it only bends and extends. Whereas dynamic mobility, you need to be able to move in multiple different planes, almost as if you need a joint that's a ball and socket, right? Which we do, which is the hip joint. The hip also is encapsulated by the glute muscles, the glutes, strongest muscles in the body. So, training athletes to use these dynamic, very powerful movers through a joint that makes more sense for dynamic movement, that allows for cutting, jumping, linear movement, rotational movement. Whereas the knee, the hinge joint of the body, can only move in vertical and linear. It's very difficult to train it to move through these multi-directional patterns. It's meant to be like a secondary mover instead of your primary mover.
Yeah.
And so my whole mantra, like the foundation, is really training people to move through these glute dominant patterns, to move through these more efficient movement patterns, that way to offload knees, load joints and muscles that can better tolerate it, but also or better absorb force, the way you can better produce force.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the underlaying. And then, so let's say I've got a middle school group coming in. The foundation of my middle school training is all based off training good movement patterns. I'm not worried about loading up a middle schooler with a lot of weight, right? That's silly. I want to really train them to be able to tighten their core properly or brace their core, which that's a whole nother topic on how to do properly. Assume glute dominant postures really well. And then through the middle school programs that we have, once you get to the high school programs, then it's about load. So now let's start stacking weight on. Let's really start to try to hypertrophy the legs of the muscles of the legs, and then working through more powerful based movements now that they have that really good foundation of good movement patterns. And I do want to kind of break down just a second too about the slow part. A lot of times you'll see athletes that go into like a gym, and everything is about speed. Like, I got to go, 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 go. When in reality, you can use the speed of an exercise as like momentum to help carry you through, but you don't have good activation through the full sequence of the range of motion. And so it's really important. All right, let's back it down. Let's go through really slowly. That way your body and your brain, your central nervous system can feel out the patterns in a slow mean. That way, when you go fast, you're firing your muscle patterns through the entirety of the range of motion. You're not activating your glute and then letting momentum carry the rest of the way. It's full activation through the full range of motion.
Yeah, I had a ton of injuries growing up where I feel like I had improper technique. And sometimes if you don't understand why you're going to do something, it's really hard to wrap your mind around staying in the technique and the discipline of doing it correctly. Whereas everybody just wants performance as the end result, but the practice leading up to it, or the technique leading up to it, really gives you the greatest way. So you've got this side of your life that's your passion. I know it's a business for you, but it's like a passion to see the end result. But what really drives it behind that? Like your thought process about what you're giving people, and I mean, why are you so excited about this?
Yeah, one of the cool things with the program is that it's like this 3-banded chord. So we've got sports performance, right? So obviously, right, elevate sports performance. But there's this PT aspect to it as well, this physical therapy. And a lot of people actually don't realize that I have my doctorate degree. So like my name is the Jump Doctor, but I actually do have my doctorate. So there's this physical therapy side to it. And then with that's also injury prevention. And so when done properly, all three can coexist. So there's this thought process out there. It's like, oh no, we have to have just this injury prevention program, or we just have to have this PT program, or we just have to have this sports performance program. One of the neat things about all these progressive models that I've designed in the program is that they all come together. And so, the end result is if somebody can better absorb force, let's say through their leg, the less that knee is going to buckle, the less likely it's going to hyperextend, and therefore it's injury preventative for the ACL. Yeah. But also the better you can absorb force, the better you can then produce force if you're during like the change of direction. Right. And then the PT aspect, right, goes hand in hand with the prevention. Yeah. And then another thing that's also really important to me, most of these kids at some point, actually for all of them, at some point, sports is going to end. Yeah. And what we want to change is the lifestyle, right? Like yes, like performance now is really important. We want them to excel in their sports, but we want them to have exercise for a lifetime. So we do a lot on education. It's like, well, why are we doing this exercise? What is the benefit of doing this exercise? And once they see the intricacies of exercise and like different programming principles, it's just like sports. You go into a gym, oh, today's a strength session. Well, what are the different parameters for training strength? What are the different parameters for training power, agility, plyometrics, whatever it might be? Just like sports and basketball, right? We're running a 2-3 zone. Well, how do you break down a 2-3 zone? How do you break down a 3-2, a full court press, man-to-man? So training and exercise, it can be just as enjoyable. And so trying to like instill that into our clients is really important.
Yeah, I think we, especially as men, and probably really for women too, when you are considered yourself a competitive athlete, when those high school years end, if you've been fortunate enough to play competitive level high school, when they end, you can feel a lot like a fish out of water. One of the videos I have here on the channel it's about that moment when I realized that's it. Like I had some opportunities to play after that, but there was no certainty, and it can almost be depressing where if you don't have a mindset of why you want to keep doing it. So if you take away the big goal of where you're no longer on the lacrosse team, or you're no longer on the soccer team, the basketball team, because you've graduated and you're not playing at the next level, it's real easy for people to get off track with that health. And I took a big hiatus when all my kids were little. I just didn't have time to do it. And I can tell you this, without working out, I'm not as good as a person. If when I actually work out, I'm more balanced, the anxiety's gone, the energy, the endorphins are moving the right way. And I think that that's a big miss for athletes when they leave their formal sport, not to keep themselves in shape, just for the mental health side of it. Personally, that's just, but I know you have some takeaways for us here this morning. Like if you really only had a few takeaways that people would lock onto, and I know you're working with a lot of young people, so it's hard to break through the skull of adolescent children and plant some seeds, but I know that there's a residual effect of what you're doing. But what takeaways would you leave the viewers with?
Yeah, so a few of them. The biggest thing that I've noticed, especially with working with youth, I mean, it depends on the population that you're working with, but with the youth, our business model has 5 different principles, and it's faith-based. And so our first principle is, and what comes first is always, in all that you do, glorify God. Yeah. And however, you want to take that, whatever that means to you, that's goal number 1, is that in all that we do is that we're glorifying who we believe in, God, our creator. And then the second principle is protect the heart. And so what that means is just to love others, especially with these kids. I mean, it's really hard right now. It's always been really difficult as a youth. I mean, there are a lot of kids out there, and I was one of them that easily felt ostracized by my peers. And I know that all of these kids have insecurities. And so addressing that via the outpouring of love.
Yeah.
And so protecting the heart, you see somebody, a brother, a sister that's having a hard time, like just going out of your way to comfort them, and just to show them compassion. The third principle is think through your actions. And so there's multiple times where we're faced with the opportunity to do this or this. And one could be something, I guess, arrogant, or it could be mean towards another. One could be a blessing, right? Or just the right decision. And so capturing every thought and then thinking through how you're going to respond, and then trying to respond in a way that can be a blessing to others instead of a curse.
Yeah.
The fourth one is stay in the solution. And so as a believer, it's really important that you stay in prayer, continual prayer, and read the Bible, just to know, what you believe in as truth, and to stay in that. And then the last one, which is my favorite, is simply have fun. This life, there's a lot of doom and gloom around us, and you watch the news, and that can hit you really hard. So it's important just to kind of take a step back in everyday life, the circus per se of life, this fast moving pace, and just to make time to have fun and to enjoy your experience, whatever that might look like for you.
Yeah. And I think that's great that it's so easy for you to communicate those 5 principles of what you do every day. I think the challenge for us, and whether it's home life, work life, whatever we're doing, is that it's hard for us to articulate the intention of what we're trying to do, right? You hear about personal mission statements, you hear about all these things, but it's almost like we're afraid to articulate the clarity of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think the challenge is we haven't really taken the time to say what is the clarity of the intention behind what we're trying to do every day. So I certainly appreciate what you're doing there, and I've seen tremendous results. And a lot of young people that I know that have worked through your program. So if people wanted to learn more about your program, I'll put, of course, your Instagram is. I love watching some of the dunks, and you have some great celebrity dunks in there every now and then. People that come through the gym with you. I call anybody that can dunk a celebrity. I had the strength shoes, and I could dunk here and there, but man, there was too many things that had to be right for it to come together. Whereas I'm always in awe of people that can just flush it so easily, and you make it look effortless. So what is the best way for people to learn more about what you're doing if they want to maybe participate in that?
Yeah, so social media wise, I'm primarily through Instagram. So you can just look up the Jump Doctor. And then my website is www.thejumpdoctor.com. Technically it's the Jump Doc, but I actually just bought the website URL for thejumpdoctor.com. So it'll just redirect you.
Right.
And then I'm also on Twitter, also as the Jump Doctor, Facebook, LinkedIn, and even TikTok. I don't really use TikTok, but I just wanted to claim the tag before somebody else did.
Right.
So yeah, that's how you can find me. And there's on my website, there's like a sign up. There's a bunch of information about our programs, whereas social media, I don't have all that information. But on our website, you can go to all of our different like training methodologies, our different levels, and there's a little blurb about each of them that can give you better insight of where your kid might, fit at in that realm. Usually I'm the one that makes that deciding factor. I'll screen an athlete, like, okay, like, you need to be in level 2 of the high school program or level 2 of the middle school program.
Well, I appreciate all that you've done. You've helped out with plenty of the basketball programs I've been involved in. You've helped out with any of the boys camps and all the great things. And I appreciate that. And it's important. I think the takeaway is thank you for being a positive mentor around children that are close to me and that are in my circle. I think it's important to build strong mentor groups around children in this day and age. I think they need to have a lot of positive voices in their head. So thank you for always doing that to kids, of course, that are near and dear to my heart. And thanks for all that you're doing. And I wish you the greatest of success with Elevate. It's a fun thing to be around, fun thing to watch. And I appreciate your time. Any parting thoughts here today?
I enjoy it. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a blessing equally for me, being able to mentor these kids. That was definitely a lack that I had growing up. So to be able to institute that into the lives of a lot of these youth is really important to me. So yeah, equally a blessing to me.
Well, thanks again, guys. Check out some dunks. I'll put it in the show notes, and I appreciate your time today.